Welcome to The Path. This podcast is a production of the men's ministry of First Baptist Church in Hendersonville, Tennessee.
Welcome to The Path podcast. I am Jeff Tarkington along with Foster Carney. Today we have our guest, which we're extremely honored to have, Lieutenant General Dennis Cavin. General Cavin is a graduate of the University of Tennessee at Martin, which is also his hometown. While at UT Martin, General Cavin was a member of ROTC, where he rose through the ranks, eventually becoming the commander. Following graduation, General Cavin embarked on a career in the United States Army that covered more than 3 decades. General Cavin had multiple assignments throughout his career, from starting a new weapons systems unit to the difficult challenge of recruiting following the Vietnam War. Like every challenge in his career, General Cavin succeeded to the highest degree. And again, thank you so much for being here. I'm looking forward to the conversation we're going to have, talking about your life, your faith, and this is the journey that a military career has led you on. What was it like growing up in Weakley County?
Well, first of all, thanks, Jeff. I grew up in Martin. My father was a sharecropper for his entire life, so we didn't have very much at all. I can remember we lived pretty far out in the boonies from Martin, so we'd ride the school bus 45 minutes one way to get to school. So we left at 6:45 in the morning to get on the school bus, ride all those country roads, and get to school by about 7:45. But anyway, we grew up a sharecropper and really had no plans to go to college. I had no money. I was going to have a chance to go. And I wasn't exactly a stellar guy in high school. The grades were kind of, so getting a scholarship wasn't going to happen either. But as it turned out, I just decided in the spring of my senior year, I'm going to go to college. And I made that commitment to myself and went to work, got some national defense loans that they call them Pell Grants now. And was able to go to college. And that's where I met my wife. Actually, I met my wife prior to that. I was a Methodist at the time, part of the MYF, the Methodist Youth Fellowship, a group of church. We were on a circuit. You know what a circuit back in those days were. And our youth director for that circuit had a picnic for 5 different churches at Paris Landing. And so I was 13 years old, and I met this little gal who was 12, just cute as a button. But she lived in Memphis. She was visiting her cousin up in Dresden, Tennessee. So we communicated with letters back and forth for a little while, and then that kind of went away because she went on about her life, and I was on to my life. And then I did go to UT Martin. And as a sophomore, you're required to attend the induction ceremony for the new freshmen. So I'm up there telling them what college life's all about and what their challenges are and how to be successful in college. I keep seeing this hand in the back of the room waving. I look back, still waving. Well, it was over. This waving hand came up, and it was Mary. And so we began to connect again and got married in my junior year, her sophomore year. And about 6 months prior to graduation, Mary says to me, what's this Army thing? I said, well, don't worry about it. It's only for 2 years. Well, I've used that line 16 times. Don't worry about it, hon. It's just for 2 years. So when you serve, your spouse is in the military as well. Well, I don't care what branch it is. Their selflessness and their sacrifice it just can't be possibly. No one can truly imagine the sacrifices that they go through.
So when you were at UT Martin, that was kind of the height of Vietnam War, and the draft was going on.
Yeah, true.
And I think I remember either I read it or heard you talk about it, that because it's a land grant school, you had to do ROTC.
Yeah. ROTC was mandatory for every able-bodied male freshman and sophomore year. And it wasn't until, while I was there, the program was designated to have an advanced program, which meant a junior and senior year. But when you did that, you signed a document saying you were going to go serve to pay back your 2 years for for 2 years. You had to serve 2 years. And again, I wasn't going to make the Army a career. I truly wasn't. In fact, they designated me as a distinguished military graduate. That's all fine and good. But back in those days, you could get 2 commissions, a regular Army commission and a reserve. Well, if you're a DMG, you got a regular Army. That means you were going to make a career out of the Army. I hadn't planned on it. So I went to the PMS and said, give that to someone else who's going to make a career, and I'll take the reserve commission. My first assignment in Korea, I said, you know what? I really enjoy leading young men. Of course, we didn't have women in the unit I was in. And it was just rewarding to me to be responsible for their successes and also responsible for their failures and taking them out of that failure situation. I said, I think I could like this Army. Well, I had to go apply for that commission again for the regular Army commission. So I did, and I was giving it back.
So you did mean the 2 years initially?
I did, yes.
So doing that, when you were in high school, did you have any intention of being in the military, or did you want to go back and be a farmer?
No. When I was on that school bus going home at night, or in the afternoons, on Thursday afternoons was drill day at the university. They have a big field, which is now a gymnasium is where that field was. But I'd see these guys in khaki uniforms with rifles, and I thought, well, wow, that's really nice. Well, I'm just junior, senior. I thought it was just really neat. And so when I got into ROTC, is when I originally decided, I think probably end of my freshman year, I think I'm going to go for the advanced program if UT Martin gets designated. And we did, but I had no intention of going in the military. I was going to go back and be a fertilizer salesman or something like that.
Definitely a different career.
Definitely a different career.
So you said you grew up going to a Methodist church, and it seems like a lot of times, back then you go to the church that's closest to where you live. Was that the case, or did you have like a lot of family that had been Methodist?
No, it was not really, but it was close. It was about 2 miles from our house. And Mom and Dad had, obviously, when they got married, had gone to that church, so it made sense.
When did you become a Christian?
Age 12, during a revival. We'll never forget. It was a hot, we didn't have air conditioning at Freeman's Chapel Church. That was the name of the church. And the preacher was really going strong, very strong. And it just, you get that sensation that comes over you that's what you need to do. If this is going to be, if your life is going to be meaningful, then you need to have a sense of direction. And that direction has to be dictated by someone higher than you are. And so, age 12, and I would say we church every Sunday and MYF Monday or Sunday nights, and we didn't have Wednesday night services because we had a circuit preacher, so just wasn't an opportunity to do that. My grandparents were church believers and God-fearing believers, and they were Baptist. So I guess I've come full circle now for the family.
That's great. I love the story you're telling about meeting Mary, how y'all met at Paris Landing when you were 13, I think, and she was 12, and then coming across each other again at college. How was that, coming back into contact with her? Now you're a young adult, 18, 19 years old, and she's 18 years old or so. Yeah. How was that, coming back into contact with each other?
Oh, it was fun. It was exciting. She's a very attractive lady. So I had to be on my best P's and Q's and be a real gentleman, because there were other gentlemen out there who were excited to maybe have an opportunity to date her and so forth. But she was a real an absolute treasure for anybody to date at that time.
How did she react to this 2 years becoming 30 years? Yeah.
I remember driving to our first assignment, which is at Fort Bliss, Texas. And that's a 23-hour drive from Martin, Tennessee. So we took off and didn't have any money. I remember we got married. We had $67 in the bank between us. So we're driving to El Paso, Texas. And I thought, well, we can't afford to stay in a hotel, so we'll just drive straight through. And as we topped the mountains, headed down to the valley where El Paso is at Van Horn, you could see these lights far away. And we thought, well, we're about maybe a couple hours out, maybe an hour. 4 hours later, we get there. And the first day, I think she cried for 12, 24 hours, just first time away from home, and you're in a place, there aren't a lot of trees in El Paso, Texas, so this is a totally different environment for her. But as we, I guess, evolved into the military life, she made a lot of friends. Our neighbors in the development we were at the time became close friends. So you build that family network because you don't have one that you had back at Martin or Memphis, where she was from then. So you begin to develop those connections, and we all share in the same kinds of work schedules and deployments to the field to train and all that.
So I guess you were a second lieutenant going to Fort Bliss.
Butterbar, you got it.
How was that going in as a new college graduate, second lieutenant out of the ROTC, and now you have men that are under you that have been in the military for some time?
Yep.
Of course, our NCOs.
Well, the Army is pretty brilliant. It goes back to the British system of structure, military structure. And you have a non-commissioned officer corps and you have an officer corps. And the first thing you learn in an officer basic course is you better not think you know it all. Even though you think you know it all, you don't. So when you meet your platoon sergeant, you need to develop a relationship with him that says, I know I'm in charge, but you have got tremendous wisdom, and I'm going to rely on you to make this a team effort. Sergeant First Class William Ketcherside was my platoon sergeant from Oregon. And as a side story, when I got promoted to 2 stars and took over Fort Bliss, Texas, I invited him to come. He was retired then, to be a part of my promotion ceremony because he was truly responsible for molding me, giving me the character and the capabilities that I needed to be a good leader. And very clearly, those that didn't follow that guideline, that didn't build that relationship with their platoon sergeant, were not successful. In fact, most of them got out of the Army after their 2 years because they just weren't succeeding.
Now, I got a question, and it's not even necessarily Army related, but after you and Mary got married, how long was it before you had y'all have one
Brandy,
daughter?
yeah,
Brandy's your only daughter.
Yeah.
Okay. How long were y'all married before you had Brandy?
Well, it was Mary was 26.
Okay.
So, it was 5 years, almost 6 years.
Yeah, okay.
And we were in Germany. So Brandy has 2 citizenships, a German citizenship and a U.S. citizenship. Well, she did have. But at age 10, you have to make a decision. You want to keep a dual citizenship, which you can do, or you just decide to become a U.S. citizen. So at age 10, she decided to be a U.S. citizen.
Yeah.
And she kind of hates that, to be honest about it, because she wants to go back to Germany in the worst way because she never got to see Germany where she was born. I think that will be a bucket list item when my grandson, Riley, graduates in 2 years. He wants to go to Germany. So I think she'll get her wish to get back there for his senior trip.
That's cool. Yeah, that's cool. How many different times did y'all have to move around during her school age years?
Well, we moved 26 times during the military career. So you count the first 2, Brandy wasn't there. So, 23 times, 24 times, Brandy had to, well, obviously when she got out of high school and went on to college, she didn't have to do all those moves, but Mary and I moved 26 times.
So, and I don't know anything about the service. If there's ever a regret I have in my life, it's not serving the country. I went into the workforce at the age of 8, and that's just what I did. So I'm grateful for.
We need them all, of all kinds and all sizes and shapes.
Yeah, sure, no doubt. But I guess not knowing what does school look like for a kid that's traveling, moving really on an annual basis with
It's difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, and Brandy will tell you she did not like it because you make friends. And I mean, in the civilian world as well, if you're employed somewhere and you get moved, I mean, that takes place. But it usually isn't as often as we had to uproot her.
Yeah.
The longest she ever stayed anywhere was 4 years at Fort Hood, Texas. She was there for 4 years.
Okay.
Made a lot of close friends. In fact, many of those went on when we went to Washington to the Pentagon. A couple of them got assigned, or their families got assigned, so she could continue those relationships. But it's just really tough on military kids.
Sure.
Did you face and you did face a challenge, but did you face challenges balancing being a husband, a father, and the life of a military officer?
Well, without doubt. People ask me, would you do it all over again in terms of serving in the military for 34 years? And I tell them right away, no, I wouldn't. I'd go to church more often. I'd have more time with my family. I'd play golf more often, but I wouldn't change being a soldier. That kind of captures, the fact that you do have to balance those needs at home. And when I came back from deployment to Korea, I was there a year, came back. Well, Mary had taken over the checkbook and doing all the things that you have to do. And I came back and thought, well, I'll just take that over. No. You got to work that. We got to work through that. So there is, as I said earlier, a military spouse, the sacrifices that they have to endure are just not really measurable. So what you have to do is you have to set priorities. And as you go back, and as I was thinking about today, looking at my early military career, we would go to church maybe once. I guess I would say I slid back a little bit like youngsters do so often. And we'd go to church maybe once a month or something like that. We still knew that God was important, religion was important, but you get so wrapped up in this new career field, newly married, just all of the tangents that can be involved in that your early life. We weren't as good churchgoers. I didn't get into a Bible study, any of that, till we got really back, probably as a major at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Then we began to realize, because Brandy is now 3 years old, so there's a real need to make sure she grew up in a church family. And for us, we needed to get back to what we knew was a very important a core part of our lives.
I think that's so common. I know it was for me when I was younger in my law enforcement career, early 20s, 21, 22, 23 or so. And you don't put the focus on your relationship with God.
Yeah.
Because, you're wanting that career advancement. You're wanting to do well in that role that you have. You want to be accepted by the others that you work with. And a lot of times it is when you find yourself that you've had a child now and you're like, you know what, I need them growing up in church.
Sure. Yeah.
And, you want to find yourself more involved. And, you get to the point also, and we talked about this on one of the other episodes. If I tell somebody, I go to church here, I don't want them to be surprised. Oh, that guy goes to church?
Yeah. Yeah, good point.
I want to live the life that people know that I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's hard, in law enforcement and military, we deal with a lot of stuff that's not always the best.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, and it can take our focus away from what it needs to be.
Bruce, Brother Chester, one of his sermons recently was talking about the individual that looks at you makes a decision about you pretty quick. If you're at a restaurant and you've got your head bowed, you're saying grace, you've just impacted that whole group around you. Now, they may not be religious, but they know you are. And they know it's important that you say grace for your meal. And that's true. It's how do you model your life? And none of us are perfect at it. I think humility, being humble, is probably one of the most significant things a leader can take on. Because it's very easy to strap on that, look at me, I'm the guy in charge, and fall in, rest safe, just follow orders. Omar Bradley, there's been tons of books written on leadership, tons of them. But Omar Bradley provided the best example of what leadership is in 4 words: see and be seen. So what was he saying? If you're out with your force, with your company, with your soldiers, you're looking at and taking care of them, making sure they got the resources they need to get the job done. But while you're out there doing that, they see you and they know you care. And they will do things for you that otherwise, if you never showed up, that they wouldn't do. See and be seen. 4 simple words, the key to leadership of people in my mind. And that applies on a shop factory, if you're Ford Motor Company or Tyson, I don't care where you're at. If you sit in your office and you don't get out and understand what your employees or your soldiers are doing, I can remember succinctly when I was CG at Fort Bliss, Texas, Christmas night, pouring down rain. I called my sergeant major, said, let's go. And we went out and stood at the gate guard, as the gate guard told the gate guards to go home. And we stood there for 4 hours, letting traffic in and out. And you'd be surprised the number of people said, what's the general doing out here guiding traffic? Well, I want that soldier to know we knew what kind of harsh conditions he was in. The Army, and I think the other services a few years back, came up with, we have toxic leaders that don't treat people right, that are in, I'm the guy, follow my orders. And so they started evaluating. Part of the evaluation system was your subordinates had to evaluate you. The 360 test, if you will. You get feedback from your superiors and feedback from your subordinates. Pretty soon you can figure out who the toxic leader is. In fact, I prevented a guy from becoming a brigadier general because I sat his promotion board because I talked to his soldiers. And they were very clear about what kind of leader he was.
The amount of time you were in the military, how long was it?
34 years.
So 34 years. And of course, you go in when we still had the draft.
Yeah. Of course, in ROTC, you weren't susceptible to the draft.
So you saw a lot of changes. And
oh, yeah.
You're in during the Vietnam War. And I would say that's probably the time the American military was the most hated.
Oh, sure.
And I think that's changed quite a bit.
Oh, absolutely has.
And then you were also in at the beginning of the War on Terror that lasted for over 20 years.
Absolutely.
Being in during the Vietnam War, what was that like? And how did you cope with that?
Well, you got to be very careful about how you talk about Vietnam. First of all, we had a lot of kids that were drafted that didn't want to be there. And many of them didn't have a high level of education or even a high level of training. So we had an Army that was very diverse, but not very professionally trained as we would compare it to today. Did they do their job in Vietnam? Absolutely. I've got many, many friends who served. I didn't serve in Vietnam because I was commissioned in 1970. This is before 73 when we came out of there. But I was in the air defense artillery business, shooting planes down, shooting at that time planes because we didn't have missile threats then. But the North Vietnamese did not have aircraft, so they had no need for my unit. But the North Koreans did, so that's why I wound up going to Korea. The 21 guys that were in my platoon in Korea, several of them had one tour of service in Vietnam, and they were very good. They were very good. Even Sergeant Oates, my driver, didn't have a high school education. Came off an Indian reservation, but man, he was good at what he did. He made sure I got to where I needed to be all the time. Now, I may have had to go bail him out of jail once, but
I did read that you tried to volunteer to go to Vietnam.
I did.
But they turned you down because you couldn't have, I think, 2 short assignments.
That's correct. Yeah, back in those days, you couldn't do back-to-back short tours. Korea was a short tour, 13 months. Vietnam was 12 months. So they said, okay, you volunteer, we can't do that. But you go to Germany, and after you've been there a year, you volunteer to go to Vietnam from Germany, and you can do that. We'll send you. Well, I get over there in 72. 1 year, 73, and I call up and said, I'm ready to go. And they said, well, don't you read the newspapers? We're coming out of Vietnam. We're not going to send you there. So I never went to Vietnam.
What assignments during your career did you find the most rewarding? And also, what was the most challenging? I know you're a recruiter following the Vietnam War when we went from having a draft to a volunteer army.
Well, that's an interesting question. I would tell you all of my assignments were good. There's a couple I would not go back and do. I would not go to Fort Polk, Louisiana. I don't care how much money you gave me. They got big mosquitoes down there. It rains. It's so hot. I would never go back to Fort Polk, though we had some great friends from Fort Polk. I was very fortunate, I think, throughout my career, and a very diverse career. Went to a lot of locations. Obviously, Germany, came back, went to the advanced course. From there, I went into recruiting in Los Angeles, California, because after you've had command as a young captain, you got to go do something else in the Army. You can't command forever. So they said, okay, you can go to recruiting, you can go to reserve, ROTC, or you can go into the reserve units, yeah. And so I said, okay, let me do this recruiting thing. So they sent me as a captain to Los Angeles, California, one of the toughest areas to recruit in America. I had the largest recruiting area in the United States as a captain. My recruiting command headquarters, my company command headquarters, was in Encino, California. That's on Encino Boulevard. The Jackson 5 lived a block from my office, and everybody would tell me, hey, if you can get the Jackson 5, we'll promote you to general right away. Okay, all right. So we were there going from San Fernando Valley, all the way out to Death Valley, all the way up to Mono Lakes in the northern part of California, back down along the coast. I had the largest area. It took me 8 hours to visit the recruiter up in Mono Lakes, just driving. But anyway, so a very unique time, but that wasn't the most fun time. The most fun time, if you will, most rewarding time is when you're either a lieutenant colonel or a colonel, battalion commander or brigade commander, because you still get to work with your soldiers. You still know many of them by name. You know all of your officers by name and most of your NCOs. But when you make brigadier general, you don't get down there as often. So you lose that connectivity that you used to have. That's why C and be seen became so very important to me. I can distinctly remember when I had a rough day as the commander of recruiting command back in 2000, I'd call my aide and say, get me an airplane. I want to go to Fort Benning, Georgia. I want to be there at midnight when the newest recruits joining our Army arrive at Fort Benning. And it was so rewarding to be able to talk to these kids, because you got to remember, this is 2000, 2001. We just had towers go down.
Right.
And so you're talking to kids, again, a young guy from San Luis Obispo, E4. You knew if he was an E4 coming in, he had either college time or had been prior service. So he's in the chow line. And I said, well, why are you an E4? He said, well, I got a college degree. I said, well, okay, what's your degree in? He said, well, nuclear physics. I said, what are you doing in the Army? He said, well, I felt I needed to serve. And so I'm going down there and talking to these young soldiers, men and women at that time, just was very refreshing. You'd leave there, go back, and you could work for another 2 weeks without having to stop for a minute, because you just were so refreshed at seeing the commitment of these youngsters to serve. And we're getting back to that a little bit now. In the last, and I won't get political about it, but within the last few months, it's been a pretty good period for military recruiting. Numbers are up significantly. I think that's because they see there's someone that they can have confidence in that'll lead the military effectively.
So in the early 90s, we had Desert Shield that led into Desert Storm, which was a very short conflict.
100 hours.
And then not a whole lot. You know, we had Somalia and some small stuff like that. But then after September 11th, everybody that joined knew they were going to go to war.
Absolutely.
Or like maybe not They knew they were joining a military that was in conflict.
Yeah.
What was the change you saw from that time into those joining in the early 2000s? And I guess until you got out?
Well, that was the time. If you remember, it was 2001 when the towers came down.
Yeah.
And so every kid, and we would tell them, you understand, oh, okay, I want to be a cook. Okay. Every cook's got to be a rifleman first, or a clerk. You got to be a rifleman first. So we would tell them, you understand, you're joining an army, an all-volunteer army that's at war. And so when a mom would say, well, I want him to join, but I don't want him to be in combat, I would never say, you can't promise that.
Right.
Can't, because we are a nation at war. But the kids, the soldiers were phenomenal. If you remember, prior to 1975, when we really, really did away with the draft, and we switched from taking anybody almost into focusing on trying to improve I'll use this term, and it's not a good analysis, but a quality person. When I was the aide for General Max Thurman, who took over recruiting command in 1978, the military categories are called ASVAB, the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. That's the test you take. And you can be a 1, a 1A, 3B, all the way down to Cap 4. The lowest category is Cap 5. That means you barely can pick up a pencil and spell your name. We were taking a lot of Cap 4s, non-high school graduates. Max Thurman came in. I was his aide. I saw the Army in 2 years shift from a Army that was doing the best they could to a no-kidding professional Army. They were all high school graduates or GEDs, and that provided our America the best fighting force it ever had. They could operate the Patriot missile system, the Abrams tank. They could fly helicopters or work on them. They were motivated and they were educated.
Let me ask you this, and this is kind of blunt, but I'm going to ask you, and then it'll lead to the next question. Have you come to a point in your life where you start off your day in prayer and in reading God's word?
Absolutely.
At what point in your life did you realize that was critical as a man, as a leader in your work, but also in your family?
I would say, Foster, it's been more dominant, more prevalent in the last 10 years.
Okay.
Because when I retired from the military, I went to work for a small company called Lockheed Martin. I was their vice president of international business development for air and missile defense. I spent 200 days of the year traveling overseas.
Oh.
So when you're in Saudi Arabia, there aren't any churches. When you're in United Arab Emirates, there aren't any churches. When you're in Tokyo, there aren't any churches. So that time was very difficult to keep a focus on my daily Bible reading, my daily devotionals.
Sure.
Just very difficult. So 10 years ago, I retired from Lockheed Martin in 2012, excuse me. I came back home. I mean, literally, I lived in Dallas. Mary lived here
I remember those days.
in Gallatin.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'd be gone. I had 4 million miles on American Airlines. And that's a lot of butt time. That's why I probably waddle a little bit when I walk. But so it's when you finally can put some of those daily pressures of a job that are remote, so to speak, you can then focus on what's important. And Mary was a big help in that, in terms of we've got to get back to a routine of reading the Bible, going to church, and being involved.
Yeah.
Every day, I use Psalm 114:24. Yeah. This is the day the Lord hath made, and I will rejoice and be glad in it. And I think having a positive spirit about yourself, about what you do, about your relationship with God is so important. Yeah. So I want to be glad in it.
Yeah, no doubt.
And I want other people to know that I'm glad in it.
Yeah.
So to me, it's very important.
Yeah. If you were sitting here having a conversation with a young guy going into a military career, or a young guy going into a military career that's listening to this podcast, maybe, how would you prioritize their walk with the Lord? Maybe they're a new believer, or they've been a believer for 20 years. What advice would you have them as far as staying focused on the Lord? Do they need to walk away from the Lord for a period to serve
No,
better?
not at all.
Never,
Not at all.
never put their walk second to.
No, you can't do that.
I agree.
And you shouldn't do that.
Sure.
But will it be challenging? Sure. I mean, let's just say you're a youngster, 20 years old or 18 years old. You go into a basic training unit and you get up 4 o'clock in the morning before everybody else does, and you're over reading your Bible. Somebody's going to pick on you. That's a fact of what goes on.
Sure.
But you can still maintain your focus. You can still maintain that relationship regardless of the environment you're in. How you do it may be a little bit different than you did back home.
Sure.
But you'll be surprised how many who do that, if they will do that, will find that there are others around them who believe the same. And pretty soon you form a group that thrives on each other's beliefs and thrives on each other's prayers.
So during your career, was this getting going and you're in your 20s, or you might have been 30, Mary had a cancer diagnosis.
Yes.
How did that affect things, and how did y'all cope with that?
In Los Angeles, California, at our recruiting command, it was 98. She was diagnosed with breast cancer. One of 12,000 in America who get diagnosed with breast cancer at age 29. Quite a gut punch, so to speak. But the military did conduct the surgery there in Long Beach, California. And the Army, to its good graces, allowed us to move back from California to Memphis, Tennessee, which is where her parents were, so that she could begin her chemotherapy and have the support of more family. We just committed to make it work. I mean, I know too many cases where the husband, when a spouse was diagnosed with cancer, withdrew and didn't become that support that they need. You survive those devastating kinds of situations because of family and friends and faith. The three F's: family, friends, and faith. And so she survived cancer for 36 years. And that's a pretty good story for her.
When y'all came back to Memphis, did you put your career on hold and take care of Mary?
No,
or were you able to still work?
The Army gave me an assignment there in Memphis, so I was still in the military, still in the Army. But she was able to go get her treatments at the naval station there, right outside Memphis. Millington Naval Air Station. Yeah, Millington Naval Air Station. And then after about a little over a year is when I got picked to go be an aide for General Thurman. She was still going through her treatments there at Millington. General Thurman was in Chicago. So I said, okay, it wasn't would you like to do this job? Is it your assignment is to go be this aide? So I said, well, okay, you can stay in Memphis with your family. And I'll go up there and I'll come home every couple of weeks. Well, I was up there about a month and I said, I don't like this. I'm missing my family. So she came up and we made it through that 16 months. General Thurman was probably the most notorious general in the Army. Not married. He worked 6.5 days a week. He was married to the Army. So that was a difficult time for a family.
So you had a boss that did not prioritize family. He prioritized military.
No, he was prioritizing. Now, he was compassionate. He would say, okay, at 7 o'clock at night, we've been working all day. He said, Dennis, go home. Because my mode of operation is I'm there before the boss gets there, and I'm there when the boss leaves. And he would say, you need to go home.
How long did you serve under him? 16
months.
And then what was your assignment after that?
I went to the Commanding General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth. And then the assignment after that, a good friend of mine was the assignments officer for the Air Defense officers. Came out to Fort Leavenworth, and he meets all the soon-to-be graduates. What would you like to do for your next assignment? And so people would say, I want to do this, I want to do this. I said, well, Stan, I want to go to Hawaii. He reared back his chair and he said, yeah, and 800 other guys here at Fort Leavenworth too. I said, but they haven't been aged for Max Thurman. And he said, touche.
So he had quite the reputation.
Thurman? Oh, yeah. Mad Max was what he was known as. Brilliant man. Taught me more about the Army than anybody or any course I could have ever had. Just a brilliant man.
Yeah, I never had the pleasure of meeting Mary. I know Foster. He met Mary.
Yeah.
She passed a couple years ago.
Yeah, on the 16th of July, 21.
And we talked before this, and you're willing to talk about this. How was that? Y'all had been married over 50 years, love of your life, mother of your children, and dealing with that loss.
Well, it was more than a gut punch. She was having some difficulty on a trip we were on a boat trip with some friends of ours. And I said, this is not right, because she would hallucinate at night. So we left the cruise we were on, it's a little river cruise, and came back to Gallatin. She went to Sumner Station, got a MRI, and I remember the call succinctly. The doctor said, she's got a tumor, a brain tumor. So we're going to send you to Vanderbilt next week. I said, okay. Of course, Brandy was with me. We're just bawling our eyes out, trying not to let Mary see that, obviously. And so we went down to Vanderbilt, and over a period of a week, they determined she had an inoperable brain tumor called glioblastoma. I had never heard that term in my entire life, but since that time, I've heard it used more often, just I guess because I recognize it. But it was not operable; it was terminal. So 7 weeks later, she passed away. A lot goes on in that 7 weeks. You want to fix it. Us type A guys want to fix it, but I couldn't fix it. So we prayed a lot, but we knew what the outcome would be. So their family and friends, very helpful during that process. For 7 weeks, I slept on the couch outside our room where we had our bed set up. Never left. So, yeah. When you've been with someone that long, and you all will experience it, you never think they're going to be the first to go. You fully expect you're going to be the first one. In fact, I was so convinced of that. Brandy had come back after helping a friend of hers help her mother, plan her mother's funeral, who passed away kind of unexpectedly. She spent a whole day doing it, going to the funeral home, all the stuff you got to do. Brandy came home at night and she said, Dad, Mom, I ain't doing this again. You guys go do your funeral planning, because I can't do it. I don't want to do it. You go do it. So we did. And we, decided where we were going to be buried, picked the caskets, did everything. I, in fact, sat down and wrote my obituary, and tomorrow I'm going to present to the funeral home my program. Got it all done. I had it done then, but I didn't do anything for Mary. So I spent 7 weeks trying to figure out how do I put all that into the right framework.
It's such a difficult time. And, when you go through tragedy, some people will turn away from God, and some people turn to him. Yeah. And it seems obvious that, you were upset, you're sad, desperate, you can't fix it.
Right.
How did the role of being a Christian, how did that come about in helping dealing with the grief?
Well, there's one thing that I will tell you and anybody that's listening. I never asked God why. Not once. Because he has a plan. And he, for whatever his reason was, needed Mary singing in the heavenly choir more than I did. So I couldn't ask him why. But it still was very difficult. A lot of people gave me great books on grieving, but the best book, and I would encourage everyone who has to deal with grief of a spouse, is called The Tender Scar. The most outstanding book for spouse grieving that you'll find anywhere. And I have been given many of them, but it's just a remarkable book to help. And I keep copies at home, and I'll mail them to my friends who lose their spouses. But it's a earth-shattering event when that happens. And again, family and friends and your faith are what helps you get through that. Now, as you and I talked before we started this, I've been blessed because I've now found someone, which I never expected to do, who has helped fill a void in my life. And it was God's doing. It was God's plan. I didn't know it, but he had a plan. And so I'm the benefactor of that great plan in the sky that God had for us.
I remember this is kind of funny, but of course I have a landscape business, and Brandy, her home is next door to your home. So when our house got built, we did her landscaping and still take care of stuff for her. But I remember one time you were away on a probably a work trip, and Brandy called me, and Miss Mary was there with her, and there was a snake that had climbed up your front door, and I was tickled to death that they were asking me to come, although I'm scared to death of snakes. I never told them that. But I remember going over, and she's like, Foster, I think it's a copperhead. And it looked like a copperhead.
Sure did.
And so I treated it as though it was a copperhead. So I got this snake off the front door, and y'all have these metal spindly things on the door. So the snake was wrapped around the beautiful door, ugly snake. I remember feeling just grateful that Miss Mary had called. And I remember from that point on, I really felt attached to her. I felt like for once in the few years that I'd known y'all, I just had a connection with her. Yeah. And so that was really, really special. When I got word that she had passed, it was right away. I think Brandy had told me, and her husband Jason are just special friends in my life. And I just remember feeling overwhelmed with sadness. It happened so quick. But I also remember coming in and having an opportunity to just pray with you, and I don't even know if you remember that, but it was a sweet time, and man, but I was so sad that she had passed away. Yeah. And
well, I just attended a funeral a couple of weeks ago of my command sergeant major, my senior enlisted commissioned officer, who was an outstanding Christian man. But and my brother passed away a year ago, this month, as a matter of fact. At his funeral, this lady read a poem. And you've seen depictions somewhat of it, but it basically says we're all in a line. We don't know who's gone before us. We can't get out of the line. We can't go to the back of the line. So while you're in that line, there's some things you need to do. There's a list of about 10 things that you need to do. And the last one is this: never think that you needed 5 more minutes. Be ready. Be ready.
Amen.
Yeah.
You've touched on this some, and this during your life. You've seen poor leadership. You've seen great leadership. What are the effects that both of those have? Because I think you learn from poor leaders also, because you learn. I don't want to do that.
Absolutely.
But what effects did that have on you, and then how you tried to teach others?
Well, again, those that don't possess the inherent traits of being a good leader, you can pick them out really quick, and your soldiers can too. So what you try to do is figure out what their success, what's leading to them being so good at what they do. Why do their soldiers love them in a way that they will go into combat and follow those orders? What causes soldiers to admire that kind of a leader? And remind me to come back and talk about the Christian general. But the bad leaders, their units have low morale. Usually their programs or maintenance programs are not well taken care of because the soldiers don't want to perform for them. And you can go into a unit and figure out right away whether it's a good leader or a bad leader. And that's just a trait you learn to do. So you model after the good leaders, and you constantly want to learn about how to be a good leader. I said, Ralph Waldo Emerson has a statement that says, "My chief want in life is for someone who will make me do what I can." And what's he talking about? Potential. In every one of us, there is immense potential, but we need someone who will make us do and make the right decision. So for me, that someone was my wife and soldiers, an American soldier. Those were my someones. So I ask people frequently, who is your someone? How do you tell them, let them know that they're important to you? I mentioned the Christian General. There's a small pamphlet written It's entitled The Christian General, and it's written about Lieutenant General Hal Moore. And you won't know that name probably.
I do know that name. I gave you a book.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I can't remember. It was a small one.
Yeah, that's it.
But
The Christian General.
That's
it. That's it. And it goes through. It's not written by Hal Moore. It's written by a writer that went with him all over in his retired years and would learn from him about how his faith played such a critical role. You know, out on a fire base. I mean, he fought in the Idrang Valley. The book was written, We Were Soldiers Once and Young. He lost 80% of his soldiers in that fight over a 2-day period. But Hal Moore would be seen out on the perimeter on his knees with flares going off in the distance. And his final comment was about his religion and where he thought he would go. He said, I just hope I make the final cut.
Has anyone has anyone ever been a great mentor for you? And have you mentored people? We know the answer to this because you've talked on this, but anybody specific you can think of?
Well, probably as I would go back and reference again, probably the most significant mentor was General Max Thurman. As hard as he was to work for, he was a true mentor.
Yeah.
Taught me immense amount about discipline, and he had a set of rules. He often referred to Rule 14. For a leader, this is important. When in charge, take charge. His example would be, if you go through the military, your career, and you let military personnel command, determine all your assignments, you never say, well, I want to go take that tough assignment that nobody else wants, and you wind up retiring as a major, who you got to blame? You got to go blame Milperson because they didn't give you a You're in charge. Rule 14. You're in charge. Take charge of your career. It's the same as when you're leading an organization. You got to be accountable and responsible. And when bad things happen, you have to be able to step up and say, I made a bad decision. And there are not a lot of people that do that or can do that or have the fortitude to do that.
One of my greatest mentors as a young guy, his name was Frank Flynn, and he passed away about a year ago. But one thing, I started in the tobacco business with him when I was about 8 years old, but he always said he never really instilled biblical values or never talked about the Bible. He was a Christian, God-fearing man, but he always said, man, you gotta take ownership for the good stuff and you gotta take ownership for the bad stuff. When you make a mistake, call it what it is and let's move on.
Yeah.
So I know that's critical.
What you're really talking about is investing in people.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Investing in people.
Yeah.
I'll give a short story. When I was a battalion commander, I had a staff sergeant, Gary Flynn, that was being brought in by his chain of command for me to kick him out of the Army because he was overweight. Being fit is pretty important in the military. Staff sergeant, that's a fairly senior rank in the Army, and here he is. He's got years of military service, and they're asking me to kick him out of the Army. So I sat down and spent an hour with that young man. I said, well, why are you even here? You're the best squad leader I've got. Your soldiers love working for you. I mean, you're valuable to the Army. Why are you here? And when it was over, I said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put this document in my desk drawer. And in 30 days, I want you to come back and see me. He started losing weight, and he retired 3 years ago as a master sergeant.
Oh, wow. Because you took the time to
You invest in people.
Yeah, that's good.
One of the things I have on here is what does it mean to be a Christian man? What does that mean to you when you hear the term Christian man? And what do you think of?
Oh, simple to me. Walk the talk. Really simple. Walk the talk in everything you do. Whether you're sitting down at the breakfast table with your family or whether you're getting on an airplane, things are going kind of hectic, or you're sitting in Sunday school in the Connect group, you got to be able to walk the talk. Now, I don't mean that in a manner that you got to be bold and audacious. You don't have to be. You can be, but you don't have to be. But you have to demonstrate what you believe. And you can't fail in that mission. Because one mistake, and then everybody knows you're not real.
What you just said, walk the talk. That's in simple terms.
And Bruce does a great job of that in all of his sermons.
Yeah, for sure.
He really does.
For sure.
When you retired, you're no longer putting on the uniform.
Right.
You're not wearing the rank. You're not being saluted. How was that? And I know you went to work for Lockheed Martin after that, so it might even be after that. How was that transition going from where what you put on automatically commands respect, and now you're no longer doing that? Was that a tough transition, or
for some people it is? I mean, I know many retired officers and non-commissioned officers who never took off the uniform. I mean, they retired, but they never took off the uniform. For me, it wasn't difficult. That was a great part of my life, but I knew there were better parts of my life to come. So I was on the airport authority. I was chairman of the airport authority out here for 2 years. I was on the authority for 6 years. And one day a guy came in. I won't use his name because I can't even remember his name, but he sat down, was talking to Don Drayton. Don had been on the airport authority a long time. And he said, yeah, I know the general well. And Don said, what general? He said, well, Cavin, he's a retired general. Drayton said, I never knew. I never told anybody. I didn't have to. I didn't want to. Because that's doing what you just said, Jeff. That's letting that outward appearance command something that.
right?
Oh,
we see it in law enforcement where it's such a hard transition to retire.
Yeah.
And, you'll see guys, they do 20, 30, 40 years as a police officer, they retire, and then they pass away.
Oh, yeah.
Within a year.
Yeah.
Because they lose their entire sense of identity because it becomes so much of who you are. And it's the same way with the military.
Well, that goes back to my previous statement. This is the day the Lord hath made, and I will rejoice and be glad in it. There's lots to do in every 24 hours.
There is.
And if you fail to take on those additional opportunities, challenges, whatever it is, shame on you. Rule 14, you're in charge. And if you don't step in, stay motivated, get involved, contribute, give back. I got 3 things I think a person has to do every day in their life. The first one is you have to give back to the organization. You have to, whether that's your church, your family, your business, you got to give back. If you go home at night and close the door and you can't look and say, well, I accomplished this for this organization or for my family, then you've wasted it. You got to learn something new every day, or else you're failing what God gave you, a brain, and He expects you to use it in the right way. And that means staying active, staying involved with mentally to learn something, because there is something new to learn every day. And then you have to say thank you to somebody every day, because far too often a simple thank you to somebody may be the only good comment they hear all day long. And you made the difference.
You've mentioned a few books. Do you have a favorite book or a favorite genre of books?
Recently, I've been reading a lot of Dr. David Jeremiah's books. And the one on the rapture about the great disappearance will wake you up, really cause you to think. But now I'm reading, and just finished reading, The Coming Golden Age. The rapture is about when everybody disappears within a flash of an eye. Just those that are not in God, whether dead or alive, will be left. But the coming golden age is about the 1,000-year millennium, or 1,000 years. And it's just fascinating. To think that for 1,000 years, Christ will come back and be the ruler of the world in Jerusalem. And that those that are left, and in fact, during the 7-year rapture, according to Dr. Jeremiah, there will be more people to come to Christianity than any other time in history. And those that don't are going to be put in the great abyss. They won't be here for that 1,000 years when everything will be perfect.
Yeah, I know you're still very active. You actually have your vest on of one of your hobbies. I'd love to hear about that and how you got involved in, competition barbecue.
Competition barbecue, yeah. Well, it's a pretty good story. When I was now my son-in-law, Jason, Brandy's husband, has always enjoyed cooking. And he started doing competitions before they even got married. He would take a Weber kettle and go out to the fairgrounds and cook one competition. And I helped him then when I wasn't traveling. And our goal was to not come in last. Just don't be last. And graduated to a couple of Traegers, which are pellet smokers. And then I retired in 2012 from Lockheed. And first thing, and of course, Brandy would help him because I wouldn't be here a lot. So the first thing Brandy said to me was, Dad, you're team A, I'm team B, meaning you're going to take over helping. And it's been a blast. It really has. I mean, great relationship. I mean, how else could you go off on a 3-day trip, sleep in the same trailer and, prep and do all that if you didn't like somebody and able to take each other's advice and just enjoy the competition. We've done very well. We've won several grand championships, and we got to compete this year for the second time in the Jack Daniels World Invitational. And we came in first in chicken in the world, fourth in ribs in the world, and eighth overall in the world. So I'd say we're doing okay.
So do you have what is your favorite thing to barbecue?
Well, the competition circuit, you have to cook 4 meats: chicken, ribs, pork, and brisket. And so what's the favorite? The hardest one is brisket. Brisket is the hardest meat to cook. I'm a fan of chicken, though. I love those chicken thighs, and they are really good.
I love brisket. Growing up in Texas, I think I have to love brisket. So I do like brisket a lot. Yeah,
but you guys in Texas do it a little different than we do in Tennessee. So you guys use salt and pepper, and that's it. And it's dry. In Tennessee, we like to add a few things to it to make it moist, have a jump flavor at you. But the brisket, the key to success in this business is, first of all, you got to start with good meat. Don't go buy a brisket at some market that's good, not even prime. We go for Wagyu. That's the best you can get. But if you're going to, have served to those judges, you better give them a good product.
Right. Do you have any other hobbies that you do?
Well, I would claim golf, but I'm really miserable at that. So, and not been able to get out there too much with back problems. I used to do woodworking. I had a complete woodworking shop, but you just evolve over your life into different sport. I did professional photography when I was in the Army. I stay very busy with a lot of things, and I just find myself not having as much time. When I retired, I told Mary, "You pick the place you want to live," because I've drug you all over the world for 34 years. I said, my only request is that it be on a golf course, because I know I'm going to play a lot of golf. Well, remember 8 years, 4,000 miles? Well, I didn't play a lot of golf in those 8 years.
I just got one more thing that I just remembered. Now, you had a couple stints in recruiting.
Yeah.
And it might have been your last one where that's when the Army decided to sponsor a NASCAR team and also the Army High School All-American game.
I'm responsible for both of them.
How did you come up with those ideas?
Well, I was at Recruiting Command in 2000, and I had a marketing firm from New York come in. Said, we have this idea about a high school All-American football game that we think the Army would benefit, and it would be an outreach to the community because so many people know nothing about the military. And they gave a great presentation, and they would pick top kids, seniors, and would go into that high school and have the high school have a assembly, and we would take their jersey into that assembly that they were going to play at that All-American game. It was always the first week in January. And so it sounded good, and I said, well, there's only one question I got. This was the very first year. I said, have you got the name Gerald Riggs on that list of kids that's going to play? Gerald Riggs went to University of Tennessee. He said, well, let me look. He looked down there and says, yeah, Riggs is going to be there. He's from high school in Georgia. I said, and he's going to Tennessee. So if you're going to have him playing the game, then I'll sign the Army up for it. And we ran it for 12 years before some congresswoman decided you had to be able to assign value to every dollar you spent, which is simply a return on investment. But it's difficult to say, okay, I paid so much money for this high school All-American football game. Well, nobody's going to sign up that day.
Right.
But you'll be surprised how many young kids are 12 years old, 5 years later, 6 years later, will say, oh, boy, I remember that was great. I want to be a part of that. She was way off her rocker and got defeated, thankfully, but thank goodness. But anyway, we were out of the program. They're now coming back. In fact, Navy ran this year's high school All-American football game. And if I have anything to do about it, the Army will take it back.
Yeah, it was huge, the Army having that. I mean, for basketball, it's similar to like the McDonald's All-American for basketball, and that really meant something. And, it's funny you say that 12-year-old sees that, then 5 years they might join the Army. That goes into Christianity also.
Oh, absolutely.
Where you're just planting that seed.
Yep.
It's so many similarities you can use across the board where, we're talking to kids about being a Christian, trying to display being a Christian man, a Christian leader, and planting those seeds in them where they're like, hey,
right.
That guy was doing things the way they need to be done.
And NASCAR was the same way. I mean, there's no better sport for young, energetic people to go to. And so getting into that was a good initiative. And NHRA, the National Hot Rod Association, ran all three of them.
It's been great. I think I could sit here and talk to you for another hour and just talk about leadership and get great examples of that.
I get asked a lot about success in life. How do you define success? So first of all, success is not created by spontaneous combustion. You have to set yourself on fire. Your spouse can't do it. Your parents can't do it. Your girlfriend can't do it. You have to set yourself on fire.
So true.
Yeah.
You have to have a passion for it.
Absolutely.
You have to want it.
Yeah.
And then you have to put the work in.
Yeah.
It's not just going to be handed to you.
Yeah.
I know Foster knows that, being a business owner, that he started when you're 15 or so, and that was a lot of hard work to be a successful business owner.
Sure.
Military career, law enforcement career, even ministers, you want your church to grow, you want to win people for Christ. You got to put the work in. So I appreciate you being here. It's
my
been
pleasure,
great. Foster, you got
anything? Thank you for being here, and just thank you for letting your faith in Jesus be a part of your life and not ashamed to talk about it. And we just appreciate you and guys like you. And there's not a lot of guys around like you, so we really have a special place in our heart for you and your service.
I'm just an old farm boy at heart.
Well, you're a good one. So thank you for being here with us today.
You want to close us out with a prayer? We've done it every episode.
Yeah, I'll close this.
We can't stop now.
All right, let me close this with a prayer. Lord, thank you for today. Thank you for this time with General Cavin, and thank you for just what he shared today, Lord. That's really impactful, and I just sat here today mesmerized as he was talking and sharing. And God, we just pray again, as we did at the beginning of this, that you use this information shared today and these stories shared today to give you glory and encourage other men to lean in and rely on you, Lord, alone. As their Savior. God, we love you and we trust you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Path, a podcast production of the men's ministry of First Baptist Church in Hendersonville, Tennessee. For more information or if you have questions, please visit our website at FBCHville.com. That's FBCHville.com.